guys, welcome back to my channel. And if you're new here, you're welcome. This is a channel where we'll discuss the faith and everything Christianity. So, on today, we are going to be discussing how to love God. So, and the inspiration for today's video is that because I've come across a lot of videos online that says we're atheists saying that they don't believe in God because God is an attention seeking God. He says he's going to destroy us because we do not love him. So we're going to be looking at that from the Bible today. And if you have any other reason why we should love God, you can add it in the comment section. So the Bible verse that we're going to be using today is Matthew chapter 22 verse 37, and we are also going to be looking at Matthew chapter 6 verse 33, and then finally we're going to be looking at Job chapter 1 verse 8 downward. So let's begin. Matthew chapter 22 verse 37 says, "And he answered and said unto him, You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment." So when it comes to loving God, it is not the same as the way you love someone. So when it comes to God, when you want to say you love God, it means God should be at the center of your being. God should be the first thing that is seen in your heart. That is why it says all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul. The whole essence of your being should be God. Because you cannot say you love someone when they are not in your heart and they are not always in your thought. So when you love God, is always in your thought and is always in your mind, and it does not necessarily mean that you have to be thinking about God, but you have to come to the position where everything you do has to be God. And how do you know is how much of his commandment, how much of his word you have obeyed. If you say you love God and he says something and you really love him, you will have to obey his commandment. Jesus said it several times that if you love me, you will obey my commandment. And that is how to love God, obeying his commandment, obeying everything he has to say to you and every instruction that he has to give to you. That is how to love God, or that is how to know that you love God. And I have read the Bible and I see that the reason why God says that you should love him is more of benefit to us than to God, because it is not our love that makes God to be God. It is God on his own. Regardless we love him or not, he is God. He is the essence of love. It is because of him. That is why we have the definition of love. So God is love and he is God regardless of whatever we say. So now let's look at Matthew chapter 6 verse 33. And what do we have? Okay, it says, "But seek ye first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you." And the things he's saying is gotten from the book of, from chapter verse 31 to 32. It's talking about food, clothing, the basic things of life. So that is why Jesus said that every other things will be added unto you. So in essence, God has to come first in our life. If you are looking for money, God has to come first. If you're looking for peace, God has to come first. If you're looking for whatever thing that you're looking for in this life, whatever thing that you need to survive in this life, God has to come first in your life. You have to come to the point where you see that it is God, it is the desire of God that comes first. Sometimes we as human we want something while God will tell us no, that this is where we should go. But as we humans we like to always have our own way, and we always have to question things. And because when God says you should do this, it is because you have not worked with God enough to know that when God gives you an instruction, it is not always what you want, and it is not always smooth at first, but the end result is always of benefit to us if we obey or when we obey. So God is not seeking your love to be God. He's not seeking your attention to be God. And also, when you come across verses in the Bible where God is saying that you should love me and all of that, it is always because, especially when he's talking about the children of Israel, or when he's talking to the children of Israel, it is always because when they deviate from the love of God, wickedness and iniquities is always amongst them. So that is why God is always saying that always put me at the center, because God is the definition of love and is the definition of justice. So when you leave the path of God, the chances are that you will be more wicked, or you will be wicked in your own way, because our goodness is not as we see it physically, but it is God that makes us to be good. It is by his definition of good that we can say something is good. It is not by our own definition. It is by the definition of God that we can say this is good. And so he's saying that anyone who loves me will not hate his neighbor. Anyone who loves me will not desire evil to his neighbor. Anyone who loves me will love the poor, will love to be a giver, because God himself is a giver. He gave his only son to us. So when you love God, there is nothing that you cannot give for him. There is no sacrifice too big, there is no sacrifice too small. It just depends on how much of obedience you have walked with him. So when he gives you an instruction, you know you love God when you obey. And then when you walk with God to an extent, when he says go, you don't question. So loving God is a gradual process. God did not impose his love on us. He only tells us to love him. And then when we see in Old Testament where it talks about is going to send their enemies to them and all of that, it is because they deviated, and then they start doing their own things. And because the heart of man is wicked, the heart of man is wicked. That is why Christians always say, don't listen to your heart. Your heart is the last thing that you should listen to as a Christian. Because your heart tells you does not mean it is true. Because your heart tells you does not mean it is righteous. So it has to be God first. What did God say about this? What is God saying about this? And when God gives an instruction, it is how much of obedience that we are willing to go. And sometimes God might give you an instruction concerning someone. Can say, give this person this. It is not because the person originally needs it or necessarily needs it. The person might need it, but the instruction is to see how far you can go with for him, and how much of sacrifice you can give to him. So that is why he's saying that when you love God, God is not a debtor. God cannot owe any man. When you give God something, he pays you back even more than what you gave. For example, Apostle Paul, when he met Jesus at the sea in Luke chapter 5, when you read the story, Jesus went to him and told him that he wants to use a sheep, one of his sheep, and then he permitted Jesus. And at the end of the sermon, you could see the miracle God did for him, letting him to catch so much fish, even though he had given up. So that is so much, that is the level of obedience that we are willing to go for him. And if you love someone, you obey their commandment, like I said earlier. So loving God has more benefit to us than to him. And when God says that this is going to happen and all of that, he's not saying that because he is the one that will permit it. It is because we do not have the understanding of the rules of the realms of the spirit. As Christians, if you understand that the world we live in is not just what we see, it is more than what we see. The world we see now is the example of what has happened in the spirit. This is just a little deviation, but when you are outside of God's love, then the devil steps in. It is not possible to be in the middle. You are either with God or with Satan. So when God says that this is going to happen to you, he's practically saying that outside of me, this is what is going to happen. He only allows it. He's not the one to bring the destruction. He allows the destruction because it is in your love that you are, in his love that you are being protected. And an example is what we see in Job chapter 8. In Job chapter 1 verse 8, when God asked Satan, and it is the response of Satan that made me to really know that loving God is for our own benefit. It gives us more benefit than it gives God. So God says in chapter 8, he said, and the Lord said unto Satan, as thou considered my servant Job. God was nominating Job. And there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and eschew evil. And in chapter 9, the response of Satan, he said, then Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for naught? And in 10, he said, had not thou made an edge about him, and about his house, and about all that he has on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land, which is exactly what Jesus was saying in Matthew chapter 6, verse 33. So, because of the love that Job has for God, he has the fear of God, and because of that, there is protection round about him. The Sabians who came to raid the cattle and all things that Job had, they were there, but they couldn't touch Job because of the protection of God around his life. So Job was protected because he loved God. And the shocking thing is that when Satan took everything Job had, his wife told him that curse God and die. Yet Job did not curse God. So it means that when you truly love God, the only thing Satan cannot take away from you is the love of God. Your spouse can betray you, your children can betray you, anyone can betray you. So when you love something, your money can finish. When you love something more than God and Satan comes and put his hand in that thing, what do? That is why men tends to grieve. The devil uses their grief to enslave them, to put them in a box. The only thing the devil cannot take away from you is the love of God. And that is where we have peace. That is where we have comfort, because there is nothing by permission of God that Satan cannot touch, that he cannot tamper with. It is only the love of God that he cannot take away if truly we have the love of God. So that is why God is saying that love me. Let me be the one at the center of your heart. Let me be the one that will guide you through life, so that when you obey me, and every of these things are taken away from you, you will not lose your peace. Because when you lose your money, if your love is in the money, you lose your peace. But when your hope, when your love is in God, God cannot be taken away from you. If you love God truly, it cannot be taken away from you. Satan cannot come to take it away from you. It is what you love the most that Satan touches. And because he cannot touch God, he cannot kill God, he cannot make God to leave you, there is nothing for him to use to hurt you. That is what happened to Job in chapter 1. Everything was taken, yet he stood firm. And at the end of it all, we could see that even what he lost, God gave to him in multiple folds. So, the essence of this video is to let us know that God does not just want you to love him, he wants you to obey him, and he wants to guide you so that when temptations and trial comes, you do not lose your faith, you do not lose your peace. And I hope that with this video, you can learn to love God and have the understanding of loving God. Thank you very much and have a wonderful day.